Hi everyone, good to see you again. I'm glad you're here. Thanks for coming around. If you're watching replayed, you are welcome. If you are here, you're welcome. Anytime you come around, you didn't miss anything, you can always come back for it. So let's dive into it. Many people believe saying no is difficult because they are too kind. But often the reason is deeper. Saying no can trigger fear. Saying no, fear of upsetting people, fear of upsetting someone, fear of disappointing people or someone, fear of losing approval. And when approval once felt necessary for connections, saying no begins to feel dangerous. So today, we are exploring why saying no feels so difficult and how building self-trust changed that. So we're going to take it in parts. I will want to call this part 1, fear of upsetting others. Fear of upsetting others. Let's talk about that. Some people are highly sensitive to emotional shifts. Some people are sensitive to emotional shifts. Some people react negatively, and the nervous system reads it as danger. Yes, the fear of upsetting others. Many people say no doesn't feel like a decision. It feels like a risk. You can imagine that. Hence, we say many people believe saying no is difficult because they are too kind. But often the reason is deeper because they don't want to upset others. They don't want people to upset. They don't want to disappoint others. Fear of disappointing someone. Fear of losing connection. Another part is approval conditioning. Yes, because we want to relate it to childhood dynamic. Approval leads to behavior. Approval leads to behavior and harmony value over honesty. Yes. Approval leads to behavior and harmony value over honesty. So how does that work? How does that work? This is one of the reasons saying no can feel uncomfortable for many people. Because approval conditioning develops when a child begins to associate connection, acceptance, and harmony with certain behavior. Children quickly learn what brings positivity, response from the people around them. Children quickly learn what brings positive response from people around them. They notice adult smiles. They notice when someone becomes proud. They notice when approval appears. And they also notice the opposite. They notice disappointment. They notice tension. They notice when someone becomes distant. Over a time, the child begins to understand something important about their environment. Something important about their environment. Some behavior brings approval, while others brings discomfort. So the nervous system begins adjusting. The nervous system begins to adjust because children learn from watching, from noticing things around them. The child may become agreeable, more careful, more focused on maintaining harmony. Ojo, look, oh, you're here. Thanks for coming, dear. Yeah. This is not manipulation. It is adaptation. It is not manipulation. It is adaptation. A child wants to maintain connection with the people they depend on. A child wants to maintain connection with the people they depend on. So behavior that protects that connection becomes reinforced. Let's take, for example, imagine a child who notices that when they agree with others, the environment stays calm. When they agree with others, the environment stays calm. But once they disagree, tension appears. The child begins to learn something very quickly. Agreement preserves harmony. Agreement preserves harmony. And once harmony is preserved, connection feels safe. So the child begins prioritizing behavior that maintain approval. They may say yes even when they feel uncertain. They may say yes even when they're not sure. They just want that connection. They don't want tension around. They want peace. They want safety. They may avoid expressing disagreement. They may soften their needs so that others remain comfortable. They they make themselves uncomfortable for others to feel comfortable, for peace to preserve, for safety. Over a time, the nervous system begins linking approval to safety. And once approval feels connected to safety, losing approval begins to feel risky. This is where saying no becomes difficult. Because saying no may create disappointment. And disappointment feel like losing approval. And if approval once felt essential for connection, the nervous system responds with anxiety. That anxiety does not necessarily come from the present moment. It often comes from patterns that develop earlier in life. So when someone asks you for something today and you consider saying no, your body may react quickly. You may feel hesitation. You may feel guilt. And you may feel the pressure to explain. Not because the request is unreasonable, but because the nervous system is trying to protect approval. And approval has long been associated with connection. Well, here is an important reframe. Healthy relationships do not require constant approval. Healthy relationship does not require healthy approval. And that means disagreement can exist without destroying connection. So learning to say no about becoming less caring is not. Learning to say no is not about becoming less caring. No. It is about authenticity to exist alongside connection. When you begin separating approval from safety, something important changes. When you begin separating approval from safety, something important changes. You realize that someone else's disappointment does not mean you have done something wrong. And once that understanding begins to grow, saying no becomes clearer. Because you no longer feel that your worth depends maintaining approval at all costs. And that shift is an important step forward. Emotional reliance. It allows you to remain kind while also respecting your own needs. And that balance is where self-trust begins to grow. So that brings us to Git response. Git response. Many people assume Git means they did something wrong, but that is not the truth. Sometimes Git simply means you are doing something unfamiliar. Yes, Git does not mean you're doing something wrong. Because guilt is one of the strongest emotions that appear when people try to say no. Because of that, many people assume that guilt always means they have done something wrong. But that assumption is not always accurate. It's not the truth. Guilt can appear for two different reasons. Guilt can appear for two different reasons. One type of guilt appear when you have genuinely harmed someone. That kind of guilt can guide us towards repair. But there's another kind of guilt that appears when we try stop others or something outside that is not familiar pattern. Simply put, as a kind of guilt that appear when we stop outside familiar pattern. This kind of guilt doesn't necessarily mean something wrong has happened. It means something new is happening. For people who have learned to prioritize harmony, agreement, or approval, saying no interrupts a pattern. Saying no interrupts a pattern. And when a long-standing pattern is interrupted, the nervous system often reacts with discomfort. Excuse me. So that brings us to emotional responsibility pattern. It's emotional responsibility pattern. So now let's look at something that's developed quickly over time. Emotional responsibility pattern. This pattern appears when someone begins to feel responsible for how other people feel. When you begin to feel responsible for how other people feel, that is emotional responsibility pattern. Not just being aware of their emotion, but responsible for them. And that's the difference. It's important. Being aware of someone's emotions is empathy. We're trying to look at the difference now. Being aware of someone's emotion is empathy. But feeling responsible for fixing other emotion is something different. The feeling of responsible for the emotion is something different. That is called emotional responsibility. For many people, this pattern develops slowly. It develops slowly. It may begin with a simple habit of trying to keep the emotional environment calm. If someone is upset, they try to keep them try to help them feel better. If someone is frustrated, they try to reduce the tension. If someone is disappointed, they try to repair the situation. At first, this behavior can feel helpful. It can even be praised. People may say you are thoughtful, considerate, and even supportive. But over a time, the pattern can become heavier. Because instead of simply caring about others, you begin managing their emotional reactions. You begin to monitor how people feel around you. You may notice small changes in tone, Small changes in behavior. Even a small moment of silence. And when you notice these changes, your mind begins searching for explanation. Did I say something wrong? Did I upset them? Did I cause this? Sometimes those questions appear even when there is a clear reason. But the nervous system has learned something important over time. That when emotion shifts, someone needs to stabilize the situation. And often that person, that someone becomes you. So instead of allowing emotional reaction to exist naturally, you may feel pressure to intervene. You may try to soften the conversation. You may apologize quickly. You may explain your actions more than necessary. Sometimes you may even change your decision to prevent someone else from feeling uncomfortable. And this is where emotional responsibility becomes exhausting. Because you are not only managing your own emotions, you are managing everyone else's reaction as well. And that can create constant sense of pressure. And pressure to keep everyone comfortable. A pressure to avoid disappointment. pressures to maintain emotional harmony. But here is the important truth. You are responsible for your actions. You are not responsible for everyone's emotional response. Remember, you are responsible for your actions. You are not responsible for emotional response someone else has. People have their own experiences, their own expectation, their own emotional reactions. And sometimes those reactions will exist even when you have done nothing wrong. If someone's responsibility pattern are strong, the nervous system may still respond as if something need to be fixed. And that is where awareness becomes powerful. Because once you recognize the pattern, you can begin asking a different question. Instead of asking, how do I fix this? You can ask, is this my mind to carry? That question creates space. And that space allows emotional boundary to become forming. That doesn't mean you shouldn't care. It allows you to maintain compassion without becoming overwhelmed. You can still deeply care. You can still care deeply about people. You can still support them. Or you no longer need to absorb everyone's emotional shift around you. And when you begin releasing emotional responsibility that was never yours, something important happens. You start feeling lighter. You start You start making decisions with more clarity. And saying no begins to feel less threatening. Because you're no longer trying to manage the emotional reaction that may follow. You are simply responding honestly. And that honesty is a part of building self-trust. Because emotional resilience grows when compassion and responsibility find the right balance. You can care deeply without carrying everything. And that balance is where resilience grows. So that brings us to building self-trust. Building self-trust. That is the part we now talked about. Building self-trust allow tolerate discomfort, allow others to manage their emotions, respect their own boundaries. Self-trust grows when you realize that someone else's disappointment does not mean that you have done something wrong. And if you have not, when you know that you have not done anything wrong, so this building self-trust is something that changes everything once it begins to grow. Self-trust. Many people believe self-trust means being confident at all time. being confident all the time. But self-trust is not about confidence. Self-trust is about reliability. It is about reliability. Self-trust grows when you begin to believe that you can respond to life honestly without abandoning yourself. People who struggle to say no, they really difficulty is often not the word itself. The real difficulty is not the word itself. The real difficulty is trusting what happened after the word has been said. Because when you say no, several things happen or may happen. Someone might feel uncomfortable, disappointed, frustrated. Someone might react in ways you cannot control. And once your nervous system has been conditioned to maintain harmony, those reactions can feel uncomfortable. So instead of saying no, you may soften your response. You may delay your decision. Or you may even say yes, even when something inside you is saying no. And every time that happens, something important is affected. Something important is affected. The relationship you have with yourself. Because self-trust grows when your action align with your inner understanding. Take that on board. Trust grows when your actions align with your inner understanding. When you repeatedly ignore your own need in order to maintain approval, the nervous system begins to learn something subtle. It's learned that your needs are less important than maintaining emotional harmony. And over a time, that weakens your sense of internal stability. But self-trust can grow again. Good news. Self-trust can grow again. And it grows through small moments of honesty. It grows when you listen to your internal signal. When something feels uncomfortable, when something feels misaligned, and instead of immediately overriding that feeling, you pause. You ask yourself, what do I actually need here? Sometimes the answer may be rest. Sometimes the answer may be space. And sometimes the answer may simply say no. And when you begin to respond honestly, something important begins to shift. You start experiencing harmony that does not destroy connection. In healthy relationship, harmony strengthens clarity. Some people may still feel disappointed, but disappointment is natural human emotion. It doesn't mean something harm has occurred. So self-trust grows when you feel other people's experience, their emotional, without immediately taking responsibility for them. And that doesn't mean you don't care. You can still care deeply. And learn that someone else's reaction is not always something you might be able to fix. If you have that, you know that even when you're unable to fix it, you will not be mad at yourself. You learn that connection can survive honestly or survive honesty. And each time you honor your own boundary, your nervous system learns something new. It learns that you can remain safe while other respecting yourself, while also respecting yourself. That is the foundation of self-trust. It does not grow overnight. It grows through repeated experience of responding honesty and noticing that the world does not collapse. And each time something else begins to appear, and with time, something else begins to appear. Clarity, decision become easier. Because they are no longer driven by fear of reaction. They are guided by internal alignment. And when that alignment straighten, saying no longer feel like threat to your connection. It simply becomes a truthful response. And that is when emotional resilience begins to deepen. You can remain compassionate. You can remain thoughtful. But no longer need to abandon yourself in order to maintain harmony. You begin living with a different understanding. You can care deeply without carrying everything. And that is one of the most powerful steps towards building a resilient mind. Self-trust. So having said that, which part's feeling most difficult for you? Upsetting someone? Disappointing someone? Feeling guilt? Or explaining yourself? Let me take the question again. Which part feel most difficult for you? Which part feel most difficult for you? Upsetting someone? Disappointing someone? Feeling guilt? Or explaining yourself? So you can let us know in the comment section. Remember, you can become compassionate without carrying responsibility for everything. You can care deeply without carrying everything. So as we come to the end of this conversation, I want to leave you with this. With something simple and powerful. For many people, learning to say no is not just about boundary. It is about changing a relationship that, has existed for a long time. A relationship with approval, a relationship with guilt, a relationship with responsibility. For years, you have learned that keeping people comfortable preserve connection. That harmony meant safety. and that saying yes has the easiest ways to protect relationship. And those patterns made sense at that time or at the time. They were adaptation. They help you navigate emotional environments that matters. But growth often begin when we realize that pattern that once protects us may no longer serve in the same way. Learning to say no is not just about becoming less caring. It's not about rejecting people. It's not about creating distance. It's about allowing honesty to exist inside relationship. Truth. Healthy relationship can hold honesty. They can hold disagreement. They can even hold moments of disappointment when there is honesty. No pretense. Because connection that depends on constant agreement is fragile. But connection that allows truth becomes stronger. Take note of that. Connection that depends on constant agreement is fragile. A connection that allows truth become stronger. So if saying no still feel difficult sometimes, that is okay. It doesn't mean you are doing something wrong. It means that you are learning something new. Each time you listen to your need or needs, each time you pause before automatically say yes, each time you allow yourself to respond honestly, you are strengthening something important. Your relationship with yourself. And that relationship become the foundation for every other relationship in your life. So remember this. You can remain compassionate without becoming responsible for everything. You can remain thoughtful without carrying the emotional weight of every situation. You can care deeply without carrying everything. When that balance begins to grow, something changes. Life feels lighter, decision becomes clearer, and relationship become more honest. And that is where resilience begins to take root. This is how resilience mind is built. Thank you for spending your time with me today. Thank you for being a part of this conversation. I look forward to continuing this journey together in the next episode of Resilience Mind. Take good care of yourself. Love you all, and God bless you. Thank you.